Anytime you're ready. Sure. Oh, color choices, yes. It was an accident.
Okay, a reminder, I'll do this at the beginning of each of the presentations. The format is that the speaker is going to speak for 15 minutes. I'll give him Chris, I'll give you a little flash here that you've got 5 minutes left. The talk will end at 20 minutes from now, and then there'll be a 5-minute session for both questions and answers, total of 5 minutes, and then we'll take a 5-minute break before the next presentation after that. Okay, so our next speaker is Chris Marlow, who's speaking on a prototype for interactive e-learning and landform visualization. Chris?
Thanks, John. I have tons to talk about and show, and I know I'll probably be pushing it at the end, so I'm going to go through some of these images pretty quickly. What I'm going to show you is really the culmination or the continuation of my master's thesis work that I continue to develop, so it's a work in progress. I don't see it ever being done, really. In many ways. A little quick background about me. It's not so important, but this is a combination, or I basically compiled 4 or 5 different presentations I've given over the last 5 or 6 years at ASLA and meetings and CELA meetings and various other venues. This project is about visualization skills and how vital they are to early or young landscape architecture students primarily. It was designed really with the intent to help the beginning site engineering students understand how to make the connection between a 2-dimensional graphic and a 3D built environment. So keeping that in mind. It's a multimedia tool that's educational in lots of different ways. And as a thesis, I asked the big question, would this actually be useful? Would students learn something from it? And I tested the tool at the end, and it turned out to be very effective. So I won't get into a whole lot of detail here, but to say that students before using this tool were in the blue category. Students after using this tool were in the red category. So there was marked improvement by using this. At least there was evidence of it. So that was a good thing. That's part of the master's thesis effort that I had. So some theses don't go this route. Keep that in mind too. What you're going to see here is a combination of lots of different software. In particular, authorware is what I'd like to show today. Incidentally, I'll talk about it later, but it's been discontinued, so it's not something that I'm really excited about now that it's discontinued. But it's the structure that everything you'll see fits within. AutoCAD, of course, most people know that fairly well, at least know of it. Land Desktop, which is an Autodesk product. LandCAD, which is an old CAD modeling software. It's not so popular these days. FormZ, which we used to have in the college, and it's kind of been phased out. And Photoshop, certainly for some image editing work. Why authorware? It's a rich media authoring tool, which means simply you can insert movies and animations and video and graphics and text and all kinds of interactions and things like that, and set them up to flow in however whatever manner you wish. It's user-friendly. You can deliver it on a hard drive, over the web, on a network. It's a pretty versatile setup. And it tracks user performance. And that's primarily why I used it. It was at the University of Illinois where I did my master's work, and it was convenient at the time. Nobody was really using it, so I undertook that. But the neat thing is, at the end of all this use, you can find out how people did while they used it. So that was good. Lots of different media. You'll see 2D plans and models and interactivity buttons and things like that, and movies. I'll go through that. This is probably a little bit less significant. This is one of the output examples, how long people spent using such a tool, what kind of score they got on a quiz, and things like that. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. I'm going to show you some PowerPoint slides here, just a few more, and actually break into some of the software and just open up the file and show you what's inside, basically. Some of the limitations of using authorware and programs like it, there's a fairly steep learning curve. There's some codes and scripting and functions and variables, things like that, that takes some getting used to. Its cost was, when it was being produced, around $3,000 or more for a commercial version. Pretty affordable, educational. The time investment, you know, academia for me has been a full-time job as it is. To try to pile more software development on top of that is just, it's very difficult. So I do it a little piece at a time every year. I try to add something of value to it. And then the other limitation certainly is that authorware is no longer, version 7 is the current and final release. There are other things out there. That Adobe makes several products that actually will take its place in various ways. A Director, Captivate, and Flash in particular. And there are a few others up there, a couple others anyway, that I have listed. So my investigations will be pursuing other routes. It has several strengths, which primarily I'll zip to the teaching examples. I think one of the things I love to do in class, and that's what this whole thing is about, is teaching, is to utilize the content that's part of this in the classroom. Open models and navigate through them, zoom in and rotate and turn upside down and understand that connection between 2 and 3D graphics. Some various applications that this tool might have in the future. I'm showing you all these things, these little bullet points, and they aren't connected to a graphic yet. So imagine, if you will, or hold on to your suspense there for a little bit, and I'll get to the meat of the presentation. But all kinds of things could be the topic of discovery in this type of environment. History classes, graphic presentation techniques, you know, it could be marketing tools for firms, it could be, it's primarily education related uses. Training, the U.S. Navy used it, or still uses it probably, to develop training tutorials for their pilots, for their officers and so forth, to learn how to do things in military service. That's an example of the kind of breadth the program has. I have lots of different things I'd like to do to it, and I think this is a point where I'll pick up where I leave off right here and just jump now into the exploration of this tool. I'm going to go into the final produced tool itself. It was a compulsory part of the class, so I had students actually enter their last 4 digits of their social security number so I could go back and track, see how people did. So I can basically type in whatever, just a little splash screen here talking about it. Introductory content, it's not that wowing, certainly. Some definitions. People were coming into this having no knowledge of landforms whatsoever. Contours, contour intervals. There are some terms presented that wouldn't mean anything to anyone. But I thought it was important to talk about those. And then how to use what they're about to see. I think that was a very important thing to help people just real quickly understand. People today, you students are extremely savvy with technology. You don't even think about these things now. I could probably eliminate that, and people would go in there and just explore and do just fine. So there's some streamlining here that I would like to do in the future. It's a pretty basic screen here, but it is the table of contents, sort of the hub of activity that kind of gets the springboard into lots of exploration. And the little boxes that you see with X's in them, that's just a code or a script that I wrote so that I didn't have to go through and visit all of these things to show you this tool. So each one of these is a hyperlink to an exploration section. A real basic description of what you'll see in each one of those explorations, for the most part, is a 3-dimensional model on one side and a 2D plan of that same model on the right. Real basic stuff, orienting the viewer based on the color base. You can see where you're standing. And a brief description about what that basic landform is. The buttons along the bottom are where you can go into further explore. It's just laid out in a way that presents what happens when the distance between the contours changes. That vertical exaggeration happens. There's the movie icon here, leads you to a movie that is the more interactive portion of this, where each landform has a model associated with it that can be rotated. A simple depression like this is not very hard to imagine. And then I tried to incorporate, with the little camera icon, a place where photographs of real landforms could be shown, just to start to embody what this form is about, this contour signature. And then some important notes about that that might be helpful in people distinguishing between similar landforms. And there are throughout various questions that pique the students' interest as they move through this so that they don't fall asleep while they're doing one thing or another, something different. So they're asked to think about something. Think about it for just a second. And they don't have to know the right answer. Just continue on. So that's the kind of thing you would get with some of these. Some of these are very extreme in their presentation just to get a point across. What is a terraced slope? And what are some images that might represent a terraced slope? Some are built, some are natural, some are very agricultural even in nature. So I'll fly through some of these because time is very short. Some of the other ones that are fairly useful are the ones, these were just landforms that I talked about primarily on the left-hand side. In the middle column is landforms and structures, where there's a combination of landform and built work. For example, let's look at a condition that's commonly encountered. Somewhere along the line, you have to figure out how to get very abruptly from one elevation to another, stairs, ramps, and how they interact with the landform, what that condition looks like. And the thing about these models is they all have contours superimposed on top or right on the surface, so that it's very clear to see the connection between 2 and 3D. So that was probably one of the more useful pieces or components of the tool. Photographs that I tried to find that really captured exactly what that model represented or showed or illustrated. So a few others, a common condition, a roadway and a driveway that intersect each other, and there's a culvert. There's usually, you often see ditches along the roads. How does that all look? In plan view, it would look like this. These models and plans are real rough. They're only built to get a point across from a three-dimensional standpoint. They aren't refined or super enhanced or rendered high-end graphics or anything like that. No vegetation, no extra structures or anything to confuse the matter. So, but I think they have been fairly successful in just getting a basic point across. Some images that start to illustrate a culvert in this case. And then across the right-hand column is more of a comprehensive experience where, for example, this is a site that I fabricated, basically, using a USGS 7.5-minute quadrangle map, something you all can get your hands on at the library real easily, and just modifying a few things to start showing different landforms and their conditions as they interact with each other. Because the first things you just saw are all isolated. This is real general. Just by clicking on these hyperlinks, you see the actual landform being highlighted. Not rocket science by any means. It's more of a show and tell kind of. Most of you probably have some sense of what these things look like in reality. But when a terrace slope is on the side of a ridge, you can start to put these things into context a little more. A little interaction here doesn't really tell you a whole lot more, but you get a little bit closer to this, be able to interact with, move this thing around and actually look a little closer at some of the features. And then, of course, I wanted to include some kind of a three-dimensional movie of that as well that starts to show the two ridges you see coming off from the west, the valley and the depression throughout and so forth. It's a little bit small just to save space and time loading, but one of the things I'd like to improve is image quality and resolution and size. The residential grading plan site is something a little more exciting. I think the way it's laid out, I think that there's a lot more excitement that actually could be built into this, and I'd like to work on that. I'm not a really great graphic designer, so I won't pretend to be. What this is doing is just highlighting, and the first image you saw there was a plan view of a site that we're looking at. The next view is the modeled portion of that site. The existing condition looks something like this. You can faintly see the contours on the surface. A grading plan was done. A house was situated. The process of design took place, and a grading plan was done. This plan actually just represents a tool, a teaching tool that I use in class to start to define what a grading plan is. What are the elements of a grading plan? That's all this is. Then I zoomed in and got a little closer. The little circle symbols there represent a legend symbol that you'll learn about in the next screen here. where each one of those circles is identified as something special, unique about the grading plan. This is really the heart of the teaching tool, I think. More of the same. The legend is identified here as to what you're seeing on the plan. So this is given as a reference guide to the students in class. And then there's the built condition, the actual model. And I'm going to open up the CAD drawing if I have time here in a couple of minutes. This is just to say this proposed solution could be fit to that land and look something like that. It's just obviously one solution, but it does show how the ditch might be addressed, sidewalk, circulation, roadways, driveway, a typical ranch-style home. I didn't go into high design on a building structure. I didn't want to pretend to do things I can't. So the next section, well, let me while I'm at this point, show you the model that really came from. This is just a real simple digital model of the site. Used Land Desktop, which is an Autodesk product, which is fairly easy to use, mainly because I use AutoCAD pretty extensively for the last 15 or so years, and this came relatively quickly to learn. But the thing about this, all I want to show about this model is the next kind of interaction that I want to start incorporating here. Oops, I'm trying to work on the fly here, is a simple water level interaction, just to imply that everything we do, and we heard that in Craig Hartman's talk this morning, really is going to one day center around, if it doesn't already, stormwater management and understanding what happens, why we design landforms the way we do, why we have to do a grading plan. This kind of tells you exactly why, or shows you real basically what's involved with that. So being able to have an interaction in this tool that you can actually lift and lower, raise and lower this thing, it just helps a lot. The detail of the culverts and the retaining walls and things like that, and the contours on the surface, it just helps to pull all these pieces together. So let's go back to the tool that I was just in. And the last section here that I want to talk about is another piece that I'm trying to fit or hope to fit into an engineering course, our final, more advanced engineering course, LA 413. This probably isn't the best venue or the best arrangement to illustrate these things. I tried to incorporate a space inside this tool that someone could zoom in on a plan and some drawings and models and things and see something in more detail. The process of roadway alignment is something that is very important to understanding how to design in 3D and how to design the things that landscape architects design. The existing condition looks like this, the model form. Pretty simple, a ridge through here, a valley through here, and we're fitting a road from a proposed road from the existing to existing. Procedure of roadway alignment is identified, real basic stuff. I'll fly through that step by step. What is it? Why do you do it? Some of the formulas and so forth that are part of it, formulas that make it happen are identified here. So it's really a digital teaching tool again. I said that these next 6 or 8 pages are just charts and formulas and numbers and things like that. Pretty boring stuff, but it's pretty important at the same time. And then you get into what does a roadway alignment look like? And I think a better drawing is probably just to open up the PDF file and actually scroll through that, the proposed road alignment or design, what it would look like when you actually draw it and grade it. And then I went the next step further and actually fabricated again a site design solution for what might happen at this little park-like setting. And this is where I want to take off and do the next phase of this and build this in 3 dimensions and actually build a tool that takes you through the whole design process, understanding basic landforms, understanding how to manipulate contours and data, how to come up with a solution and plan, and then actually look at the built form and carry people through and be able to visualize that as well. So that is that's the essence of what this tool is about. It's the point I am at right now, and I think I have a lot of high hopes in the end for doing other things like these things. I'll wrap up here. Electronic evaluation testing. I'd like to do things that, as part of this, that allow me to assess whether you learn anything from this. Is it useful? So at the end of this, at the end of each module, for example, there might be a series of questions or a quiz or some kind of evaluation that I can then go back and say, oh yeah, these guys are learning, and if they are, then I know I'm on the right track, and if you're not, then I've got to do something to make this better for you. More interaction. There needs to be a lot more things to do in this. Right now, there's a lot of static things, but still fairly effective in some ways. Additional landform examples, more comprehensive experiences. And that's essentially all I wanted to talk about. There's a lot to show. I know I left a lot of things out, but you don't know that. Only I do. So I'd be happy to field any questions you might have, or go back over anything that you wanted to see again at this point. Jeff. I hope so. I don't know all the possibilities that are out there. I know Director and Captivate is fairly new on the scene, and Flash, I haven't used Flash a lot, but I know it's very powerful in creating graphics that are animated, that move, that can be more interactive. So I would like to either consider stopping with this and taking pieces of it, pulling them out, and actually creating a new tool that's isolated the roadway alignment and design category, for example, the last thing I showed. Maybe that is just a module all by itself. I mean, we've talked a lot about, you've heard a lot about distance education and the opportunities that are there. This kind of tool is very appropriate. It's right in line with that, with facilitating that kind of experience, because you can deliver it over the web very readily. So I would love to create these teaching modules. Basically, I don't know if this one big guerrilla program is the best way to do it. So, but yeah, I think definitely. Yeah, I am. It isn't something that I have loaded in the computer labs. It isn't a piece of software that I hand to the students and say, load on your machines. But I open up the models and I open up the tool and I go through pieces and parts of it as they apply to specific lessons in class. So yeah, I hope, I have some third-year folks in here who actually had this last fall. I hope that it actually helped in certain places in the class where we could zoom in on a retaining wall and see that the contours truly don't disappear in plan view. They're there still, imaginary, that is. You won't go out and see them painted on the ground, will you? But yeah, I definitely like to make it. At Illinois, it was a compulsory part of the grading class, the early grading class, and a geography class as well. So I loaded it on the machines. All the students went in a very controlled environment. They had a certain amount of time the lab was open. They'd sit down, they'd take this, they'd use this. It took them about 30 minutes on the average to do it. They came out, I gathered the data, and came up with those statistics that showed marked improvement from before they even saw this thing to after they saw it. They had more confidence sketching. There were some sketching questions on the post-test. So pre-test, post-test is the kind of testing I did. So yeah, definitely to answer your original question, I definitely use it in class. And I've used it in Design Studio as well as engineering. So it's really hit the ground on all those. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, this could be the environment for all that kind of thing to happen. I'd love to build in more rich material content, such as hand-drawn solutions, rough conceptual design concepts that, or solutions that start to identify how do we come up with that roadway design that I just showed in plan view. That means nothing to you all because there's no process shown. I'd love to show the process and how do we come to these drawings. Showcasing student work is a great idea. Drawing sections. There are no sections as part of this tool. I'd love to include other kinds of design drawing as part of this. So you can imagine this being as part of this big, huge gorilla, or breaking modules out and using a tool like Authorware to present these things. That'd be great. I would love it.
Thank you very much, Chris. We're going to need to close the questions here. We have 5 minutes for a break, and then we'll start the next section promptly at 2.
Thank you.